everybody. Welcome to the Silver Lyming. My name is Anne Desjardins. I'm your host here, and I'm so excited to have this podcast, this platform to share some ideas with you in terms of Lyme disease, tick-borne illness, what it looks like, what can possibly happen to you, and the fact that you can get better. And so this is just something that I've found has been very helpful to me in my journey of hearing other stories that have about people who have gotten better. And my guest today, I'm chuckling a little bit in the sense that I'm slightly embarrassed. So my guest is Ian McCartney, and he's joining us from the UK. And I crossed paths with him about 4 years ago. And it was the connection of Lyme disease that brought us together. And I have to laugh now because we were just talking a little bit, connecting again before starting to record. He brought up a book, and it didn't click in my head that he's talking about his book. But he wrote this fantastic book called The Kiss of Lyme. And now that we've talked about it a little bit more, I have this book. I bought this back in 2020. This was a book that I read to, again, help me on my journey and just different stories about people who have gotten better and recovered from Lyme. And this was something that Ian brought forth. He wrote this book. He put this out to do very similar to what I'm doing, is just to inspire others to know that you can get better, you can recover from this insidious disease. And I think really more what stuck with me about Ian is the fact that he started a company through his sickness. And so I'm going to have him share, of course, his story with us about really where he came from and how he became involved in this world of Lyme and tick-borne illness. But I would like to put a plug in here for you. If you're interested in a book that's going to help you to feel a little bit better, to know that you're not alone, that there is hope available outside of this podcast and other people's stories who've gotten better. This is a great read. This is a quick read. This was one that I blew through and really did find it valuable in just encouraging me to know that I could get better. This is the stuff that we really need to hold on to when you're going through this illness. It can be very lonely and dark and discouraging. And so every bit of information that we can get to help counter that narrative, to know that it is possible to heal, is well worth it. And so without further ado, I'm going to again bring to you my guest today, Ian McCartney. He is the owner of Plytime Learning. And again, I'll let him share a little bit more about what that is and what that involves. But I just found so much inspiration in his story because he was completely on death's door and has really overcome that, regained his health, and made a very successful business out of that whole experience. So thank you for joining us today, Ian. And if you couldn't take a few moments to share with us a little bit more about who you are and how you became involved in this wonderful world of Lyme and tick-borne illness, please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, will do. My sort of journey into the wonderful world of Lyme started in 2008. I was in the UK flying kites with my two children, who were 5 and 7 at the time. And we basically didn't know anything about ticks, didn't know anything about Lyme disease. And we noticed when we came back into the house that my daughter was covered in sort of like raspberry seeds on her arm, what looked like raspberry seeds. I tried to brush them off, nothing happened. I went and got a set of fur skewers and tried to pick these things off, and my son ran to get his magnifying glass from his spy kit he was like really keen to use, and we noticed this creature that we pulled off was crawling across the sink. So we still didn't do anything about it. We basically just pulled all the ticks off my daughter, all the ticks, checked my son, pulled them all off him. We must have found about 50 ticks on that particular day, but we didn't check ourselves at all. And because we didn't know anything about it, it just didn't click. It didn't click that there could be anything wrong with it. We just cleared them off, and that was it, basically. And then a couple of weeks later, I used to travel quite a lot with work, and I was in Holland at the time, and I came down with this really bad flu. It was August, middle of August, really bad flu, felt terrible, and didn't think again anything of it. Came back home, and then just over the next course of the next few weeks or months, just one thing after another started to go wrong. So I got these really bad blisters all over my feet. I was losing my eyesight in one eye completely. My fingers were going numb, so I was having the ends of my fingers were all white. I was feeling nauseous. I was kind of had this, used to describe as a hangover without the enjoyment of getting there. It was just feeling like that every single day. And then the worst thing, or the most disconcerting feeling, though, was I had this, felt like my head was in a vice of some sort. It was like My brain no longer fitted into my head properly. Really uncomfortable all the time. The movement was uncomfortable. Everything was uncomfortable. So this just carried on, and every single symptom got worse. And I went to the doctors fairly early on, and they would treat the blisters, for instance. And I was saying, but there's something else going on. They treat that. Look at the hands. They'd look at each individual symptom, but not the whole piece together. So I just basically got progressively worse. So this was August, and then in Christmas, I think I finished work for the Christmas break, and I just went totally blind, just sitting at the table, couldn't see. My daughter just started making fun of me at the time, but I just couldn't see. And that moment, I just felt dreadful, so bad for the whole Christmas break. And then the difficulty then was I knew there was something properly wrong. I needed to get a diagnosis, but I struggled. And I think, like most people, really difficult to find a diagnosis. I went to lots of doctors in the UK. I went to private doctors, National Health Service doctors. And I got round to, I think it was about June the following year. So I've been at this for about 6 or 7 months trying to find a doctor. And I eventually went to a clinic in the UK called the Breakspear Clinic. And I remember sitting in the car, and I was just saying to my wife drove me down because I couldn't drive at this point. And I said, well, I don't know why we're bothering. Everybody we've spoken to can't solve it. We don't get any answers anywhere. I don't know why we're bothering. And she said, look, we're going to go because we need to try everything. Got there, and they said, basically, you've got Lyme disease. So after a few tests anyway, they tested me, and they said came back that you have Lyme disease, and they started me on this course of treatment. The big problem, I think, beforehand was the fact that without having a diagnosis of anything, you can't do anything. And I remember during my journey speaking to the doctors, I didn't mind them telling me it was Lyme disease or telling me it was illness A or illness B. I didn't really mind what it was. But without a diagnosis, you can't do anything about it. And all I wanted was something. So I remember speaking to a doctor who, once I found out the diagnosis of Lyme disease, he was telling me, you can't have Lyme disease. You definitely haven't got Lyme disease. And I was saying to him, so tell me what I have. If I've not got Lyme disease, you tell me what I have, and I'm happy to hear you. And he just he was obsessed with calling the clinic I'd been to a bunch of charlatans who were no good and just taking your money. And I said, that's fine. If you can come up with something better, then I'll go with whatever you want to do. And he basically said, I think it might be depression. And I was flabbergasted. I mean, I was literally, I've got all these different symptoms. I'm losing my eyesight because I'm depressed. My fingers are going white because I'm depressed. All these different things. My wife was in with me at the time. She was absolutely livid because she had seen what it was happening. And so we came away from there, and I started this course of treatment. And to be fair, the treatment stopped it getting worse, but it wasn't making it any better. So I kind of plateaued for. I was probably taking lots of antibiotics, probably for about 12 months. The first batch. I then went back and said to them, "What can we do differently?" And they were sort of muddling through. So I tried another 12 months of something else, and that again didn't make it any better. And then in your own head, you're thinking, "Was that doctor right? Was it? Because I reached this point, and I'm paying for it all privately through a clinic. Was he right? I'm not getting better anymore. What could it be?" So again, I went back through the normal National Health Service over here, and struggled again, still couldn't get any further. And eventually I ended up going to Germany. And there was a clinic in Germany that had been recommended by a number of people, because obviously I was reading more into it and trying to find out what was going on. And I went to this clinic, and it was a very different experience. They analysed my form of Lyme and gave me a sort of personalised treatment plan. It wasn't out of the box. It was personalised to me, and they said, "Go and do this." And I went away and I was taking 50, 60 tablets a day, and and a really important thing, actually, I kept a diary. So from the very early stages, I kept a diary of how I felt every day. And they were saying to me, if you do that, you might not notice any great differences from day to day, but over time you might see something happening. And it was a really strange experience. I remember actually sitting here. I used to do a lot of spreadsheet work with my job. Anyway, I remember analysing this spreadsheet one day, and I noticed that the trend had started to change, and it was like this real sort of awakening that I hadn't felt better properly. But I noticed the trend had started to change. It just gave me that massive boost, thinking, God, something's actually starting to work. And so I carried on with that clinic, and my course of treatment changed over time, and they changed it for me. And it took me from, I think, until 2000 so it was 2008 when I was bitten. It was 2012 when I had to have time off work. It was 2015 before I went back to work, and it was probably 2018 when I felt human again, basically. So probably a 10-year period during that whole journey to get to a point where I thought, and when I say feeling human again, what I got to was a point where I could control it, and that was a really important thing. So it was a case of, I think we were talking earlier, you can have bad days, you can have days we don't feel great. I knew that if I then upped these particular tablets, that would make me feel better in a couple of days. So I felt like that I was in control of it rather than it controlling me, which was a great position to be in, really. So from that moment on, probably from 2018, 2019, I felt, progressively better and less reliant on any sort of tablets, basically.
Yeah, awesome.
That was the journey.
Yeah, that gave me goosebumps when you said like you're tracking your progress and that you could actually see the trend change, right?
They made me feel quite emotional actually saying it. Actually, just at that moment, it was like it really was something I'll never forget. Just seeing that was a big change, huge.
Yeah, and that's something that I have recommended in past shows to people, and something that I did, and something actually that I'm finding is maybe universal to those of us that have gotten better, was some sort of tracking system. And I would use a number system on a daily basis, 1 to 10, how am I feeling? Yeah. And over time, I could see progress that way, and less intense days and better days. Or like I would have 3 bad days and 4 good days instead of all bad days, that kind of thing. And
exactly the same as mine, exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah, it really does make a huge difference, because when you're living it, as the clinic was telling you, as you're going through it in the day to day, it's kind of hard to gauge the improvements or the changes, because you're still like in this space. But when you step back and you give yourself enough space to look at it that way, you can actually really see that.
Yeah, it's like because I think during that whole period, you're never feeling well. You're never feeling, I feel absolutely fine. It never gets to that. But what you notice is that, what you struggle to notice is, or you probably forget, is you didn't feel quite as bad as you did 12 months ago or 18 months ago. And it was that piece. I mean, this thing went on, this tracking thing went on for 4 years for me. So it was a very slow thing. But when you just finally saw it, you thought, obviously something, for the first time you felt something was going right, I think, basically.
Yes. It's a big thing of encouragement. And it's like, it's such a slow, gradual degradation of self through the sickness period. Like, I feel like symptoms accumulate over time. Yeah. And so that also messes up your compass for being able to know if you feel well or not, because you've just gradually been feeling worse. So it's really hard to remember what it feels like when you were healthy.
I think you do. I think you do forget what well feels like. I think it's something that just naturally, well for you is almost, can I get through the day without feeling awful, as opposed to feeling well as such. But it's just the nature of it. I think the other thing I found, which was really important for me, was when I had to take time off work. So after I was in 2008. And I tried really hard to get through work as well as illness. And I was clearly struggling to do that. And I was saying, I remember an incident I used to fly quite a fair bit with work. And I was in Russia, in Moscow. And I was on the toilet of an office block. and I just was in pieces. I was just really struggling, and I struggled to make it back to the airport, struggled to make it on the flight. Got home and said to my wife, I'm going to die if I don't do something about this. I am literally, I cannot believe I am not going to die very soon if this. And I said, I don't particularly want to die in Moscow. So I spoke to work, and they were brilliant. They gave me 3 months off, and because they could see the state I was in, they gave me, and they were great. They gave me 3 months off, and that turned into 2.5 years. So I didn't go back for 2.5 years because it took that long to get better. But one of the big things in that period was having a purpose. And so for me, it was odd because I'd made a board game for my two children, maths board game for my two children when they were 5 and 7, which was the same year I got bitten. And it was purely because they'd come home from school all the time with these maths games, and the older one would always beat the younger one. She'd always end up in tears. We'd have to dumb down to her level. It would all be a little bit of a mess, but we all enjoyed playing games. So we made this game that basically we could all challenge. We could all be at our own level. It was challenging for everybody. So we made that, and it seemed to work. And the school actually, a few months later, asked to see what it is. What they noticed, my daughter in particular, her maths had really improved. They noticed this, asked what it was. She said, we play this game, and they said, can we have it? And I said, no. No. It's a piece of laminated cardboard. It's got pieces stolen from other games around the house that we can no longer play because we can't find the pieces. And I said, no. And we kind of forgot about it, but we kept playing. So for some reason, we kept playing year after year. When I became ill, I said, right, they'd asked a few years ago to see the game. I'll make some prototypes. So I made some prototypes for of this board game to take into school, and it was purely about keeping busy. I needed to have something, even though in my head at the time when it first started, it was only 3 months off. I needed something to get me up in the morning, to make sure that every day I had a purpose. Every day was a reason for me to get out of bed, to do something, and stay positive about things, and take my mind off not feeling particularly well. So that's where my journey into Plytime sort of came from, really.
Yes. So in a sense, it was kind of a good thing that it happened, because you found this new purpose and new thing to put yourself to. And what a beautiful gift that you're giving back. I think where you were before, because I work in that industry, is good and it serves a purpose, and we have things that we need to do. Yes. But what you're doing now is just so much more of a, I feel like a true benefit, right, to the world, that you're giving back a gift that kids are going to carry with them through the rest of their life. Like you're forming little minds.
It was funny because I was at a when we made the games, one thing went on to another basically, and we made the game, and then we started to be asked by schools, can you come and when my wife took it into the school for a demo, this prototype anyway, and the school said everybody should have this game, and they said that they loved it, and so for some strange and unknown reason, we ended up producing it, which is a really odd thing to do because at the time we weren't game manufacturers. We found a manufacturer who's based in the US that I never met, and they basically subcontracted it to a company in Hong Kong who I never met. And the minimum order was a container load of games. And it's like, I must have been really unwell to have committed to going to do that. but we did. And then one thing led to another, and we were being asked to, can you come and play the game in schools? Can you come and do this? Can you come and do that? And so over the course of that 3 months that then extended to 2.5 years, we were testing this game and other things as well. So we were testing it with tutoring and everything else. And I remember at one point I was sat in a corridor in a primary school. So, children were about 7 years old running past. And a message came on my phone which said what you were doing, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago. And it had a picture of me. I was on this boat on the Bosphorus in Istanbul at a board meeting. And I said, I am now sitting in a plastic chair in a corridor in a school. And I said to my wife, that's progress for you. And she said, and she actually turned around to me and said, He said, 2 years ago, you couldn't even have sat in that chair. He said, that's progress. So I kind of realized, actually, I was really lucky. So when I went back to work, eventually, after that 2.5 years, it wasn't quite the same. It was kind of like we found something that we were helping people with. And financially, the most stupid thing I ever did in my life, probably, but I felt it was what I wanted to do. I wanted to try to see whether or not I could actually make this into something that really worked for people rather than my original career. So I ended up setting up this company called Plytime, and away we go, basically.
Yes. Well, it sounds like it's turned into quite a success. And from what I was reading, it sounds like you've also just gotten a very large grant to help to develop more and to expand this more into and get a broader reach for your audience, which is fantastic. And I know you eventually, from talking to you, it sounds like you want to expand into the United States and some other countries and things like that. So if you're somebody who's listening and you're very curious about Ian's game and you're in another country, I'm sure you can reach out to him and
by all means,
get a little bit more information about that. And can you also tell me then with your book, at what point did you decide to write this and really have this come to be?
I think I'd started to improve. When it was, and as I said, about around 2018, I felt like I was sort of human being again, and I felt looking back, I'd been really lucky to get to this point. I knew from reading on forums and speaking to people that not everybody was in the same position, and I'd always felt one of the hardest things was hope, was knowing that other people have got better. No, it seemed to be littered with people who were still struggling, people who were still really unwell, all talking about symptoms. And I just want to know someone got better, just to allow me to think it might be me one day. I just want to know someone who's got better. So I basically thought, right, what can I do? I'm not a medical person. I don't have a medical background. I can't help you from that point of view. But if I got better, then maybe other people who've got better as well. Can I put together a small book that's fairly simple to read, that's just going to explain people's stories to wellness, basically? And that's what I did. So I put a few messages out on Facebook forums and said, anybody interested in doing this? The first message I put out, I think I got one reply. Second message I put out, I put another message out a couple of weeks later. I got about 60 replies from people who were really interested. So I just went through, spoke to people, and then the first 7 people who replied, basically, who were really committed to doing it, we just started chatting, and I sort of wrote their stories on their behalf into this book. And it was amazing because it was very therapeutic for me. It's cathartic to actually write down what you've been through, because you don't tend to reflect on it in that same way. But everybody had been through different things. That's what amazed me. We'd all been through different journeys, completely different symptoms, completely different treatments. The only thing that was consistent with everybody was nobody had been able to get diagnosed quickly, and nobody had recovered quickly, but everybody had recovered. And it was a case of I started to think or realize that in order to get better, there's probably a combination of treatments that will work for you. And that same combination might not work for somebody else, but it's just about finding that combination. You have to try different things to get there. And I know some people are very skeptical of certain types of treatments, and others love those type of treatments. It's whatever works for you. And I just think you have different people have different thresholds and different things that they need to make them well. You just got to keep going until you find something, but you can definitely get better. And that was the purpose of the book, really.
Yes. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like maybe that's how we connected. Was you had reached out to me to see if I wanted to share my story. Yes, but I think at that time, I wasn't in a place where I am now either. Like, I was only maybe halfway healed. I wasn't fully healed. And so that's probably why that never materialized until now. So yeah, I apologize. I'm not remembering that part about like how we first connected, but I'm really glad that you made it a success and that you were able to write your book, because it is something that I read, again, despite the fact that I didn't necessarily remember that you wrote it when we started talking about it today. I do remember reading this book and just the hope that it put into my soul, again, that I could get better, because as we touched on, it's it's lonely there. And it basically turned me into a living, breathing zombie.
Yeah.
I was not really able to function in the normal world or communicate normally. My brain just was broken and I couldn't talk. I couldn't remember people's names. I still struggle sometimes with people's names that I've known for a very long time. It's just, I don't know if that part of my brain, maybe it was never formed well. I don't know, but that part sometimes is still hard with the memory things.
Yeah, I think memory is a thing. I remember I used to work, the company I used to work for is the Keller company, so it's, the cereal company who were great with me. And I remember I've been in this office, I've been going to the same office for every day for 10 years or something. I remember one day I was standing by a drink machine and I was lost. I didn't know how to get back to my desk. I couldn't work out how to get back just because of the same things you're talking about. Your memory, your mind just changes, and things that were once simple become a bit of a struggle, really.
Yes. Yes. And so where are you at now? Would you say that you're 100% healed? Like you don't have any symptoms? You still have flare up every now and again?
Yeah, I think still have occasional symptoms. Still have some days where I don't feel. It's kind of like I might not feel 100%, and it's a case of the good thing now though is how I just sort of describe it is I'm in control now. So if I have those days where I don't feel well, I know I can take these huge tablets, whatever they may be, and I know I can feel better in a couple of days. I just know it's going to work, and I've got the confidence that I'm in control of that illness. So when I do have a little flare up of some sort, which I have to say they're getting rarer and rarer and rarer. I mean, as I said about my eye, for instance, I was losing my eyesight when I was at the peak of it. I went blind. I was losing my eyesight every 2 or 3 days from that point. I haven't lost my eyesight now for 3 years. So it's that sort of level, it's so much less than it was, but now it's controllable and manageable. So I wouldn't say now that Lyme disease affects my life in any way at all, basically.
That's fantastic. And did you have to do any type of lifestyle modifications, diet? Did you change? Do you eat gluten? Do you drink alcohol? Are there things that you can and cannot have? Or
so now there is nothing really that I have to keep out. I took out all low carbohydrates. I took out all sugars. I took out all alcohol while I was recovering, and then gradually brought those back. The one I've tried to resist slightly more is the sweet things.
Okay.
I still know that is something that if I did too much of that, I think wouldn't help me at all in many, many ways. But yeah, that's one I tried to. And I always remember going back to when I was really ill. I almost had this, not addiction to sweet things. I've never eaten many sweet things before, but when I was really ill, it was almost like I was feeding on sweet things. I was eating more sweet things then than any other point, which was something as if, this thing wanted sweet things. So I try and stay clear of those, basically.
Yes. And I feel like that you've touched on something that's very important to bring out is that the disease feeds on certain things for sure. Sugar, supposedly like vitamin D, some of our hormones, different things in our body, cartilage, collagen, not cartilage, but just different substances in our body that it feeds on and it wants. And so that oftentimes will drive you to eat differently or do different things that you shouldn't probably be doing for your body. But just to remind yourself that that's not you, that's the sickness. And sometimes that helps just to give you a little bit of perspective to stay stronger, to stay away from those things. But they very much do contribute to that and feed that and give it the energy it sort of needs to continue on. So it's funny that your body can feel that or knows that.
Yeah. I think at the time when you're in that position of going through this for years, you'll try anything that someone tells you it might help. I think you'll just try. Someone said to me, take out a dairy. I've taken out dairy. Someone said take out sweet. I'll take out sweet things. It'll be fine. I'll just give it some time and see whether that worked or not. Use this tracking sheet, and I kind of know.
Yes. And did you do any kind of like emotional digging in self or meditation, any kind of work along those lines to help you?
No, and I know a lot of people in the book did, and they found that very helpful. I personally didn't. I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. It's never been something that's been particularly a feature of my life prior to that, and it's not something that I just didn't. In a way, my therapy came through things like working and keeping busy and occupied and things like that. To be honest with you, but I didn't do anything like that.
That's fair. And I just always I'm curious about that with people, and I think about a lot of times we feel like dis-ease can come from emotional unrest or emotional sickness or just dis-ease with self. But then I think about kids, right? And I'm like, where do they really fit into that equation? Because they're not in the same space a lot of times that adults are from an emotional spectrum. And so how does that really apply to them or kids that get cancer or something? Like I still struggle with that a little bit. And then, to talk to people like you who didn't really have to look at that side of the spectrum to heal lends itself to the thought that not everybody is in that space. But I do often trace it back to some sort of trauma or something that has happened to people. That sickness is there in the first place.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who I did speak to at the end of the day, if something works for you, then great. If you can find a cause for it or a reason or something that gives you some sort of relief, then great. I think that's fine.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
If that's what it's going to do for me, great. I want to do that. But it is, and we had talked about it too, is like really what makes the difference? Why did you get better? Why did I get better? Why are other people still sick? What is that? And is it truly just what you had talked about with the different permutations of treatment and figuring out that actual individual's needs? And this is something else too we haven't talked about. Did you have co-infections? Did you just have Lyme, or did you have things like Bartonella, Babesia, other things?
Well, yeah, it was talked about that there were co-infections. So when I ended up going to Germany to get treatment, and they talked about co-infections, and I deliberately. It sounds a bit strange. I deliberately ignored all the talk of co-infections or anything else. For me, I was just focused on, you've told me to take these tablets. I will take these tablets. And if you tell me I've got 50 co-infections or one co-infection, I don't really mind. It's like, I'm just going to take these tablets and I'm going to do this tracking thing and I'm going to try it, because that's all I could get my head around, really. I was actually finding at that stage, when I read more about it, I was causing myself a little bit more anxiety because there was almost too much to take in. At the time, I couldn't take it all in. So I just sort of, yes, there were co-infections. I ignored what they were and put my trust in these people to say, this is what you need to take, basically.
Yes. I've thought about that many times. Is it better to know, or is it better to assume and not really know and just treat like it's there? Because it is overwhelming.
There's a bit of both. I think it's. I remember sort of for me. I think I wanted to know more, and I wanted to know a lot at a certain stage. Then I found myself at another stage. I actually felt physically sick when I was reading stuff, and I thought I don't need to. So it's like that. I was just at that stage. I think when I was in that, I was finding it difficult to take anything in at all. Anyway. So I thought it just wasn't helping me to know more. I just wanted to. I knew enough to know the questions to ask when I met a doctor, and that was fine. I didn't need to. I couldn't take it in, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and that's okay, as you're saying. Like, it's okay to be in that space. It's okay to not know. I mean, I think really what people need to know is, yes, do I have tick-borne illness, or no, do I not? If I do, then these are the things that I can do to help myself. And if I don't, then I'll just keep looking elsewhere. But just finding that out, the diagnosis itself, is huge. And
massive. I think when you were talking before about, did you have any sort of other sorts of like mental sort of treatments or anything of that ilk? And I know I was really struggling before I got a diagnosis, and I was struggling more and more and more with every passing week. It wouldn't have been long before I needed something of that, because I was struggling. And I think that getting the diagnosis it's one of the hardest things to deal with, as well as one of the hardest things to get. At least when you've got something, you can say, right, oh, I can now start that process of getting better. And it might take me, I think when you have the diagnosis, you think, I'm going to get better. I'm going to get better in a week, because that's what typically happens before you hit Lyme disease. But at least you've got something.
Yes, correct. It's like, woohoo, I'm going to take my 28 days of doxycycline and I'm going to be good to go. It's going to be a great thing. And then it's like, oh my God, this is not, God, this is horrible.
But I also think that was one of the things I found that was slightly difficult when dealing with other people, because you'd had this diagnosis, and typically, I remember typically, I didn't know, apart from major diseases that are frequently discussed and researched hugely, when you had an illness, you recover quickly once you know what it is. Whereas this was something that isn't well known, isn't publicized. Therefore, sure, everyone was expecting me when I had the diagnosis, you're going to be better than in 28 days or whatever it is. And for them to see, because I used to play a lot of sport at the time, and everyone said, "Oh, you'll be back. I'll put you down then. Now you find what it is. I'll put you down on the list then to be playing again in next couple of weeks." And I actually said, "Yeah, yeah, go for it." And sadly, that didn't happen for about another 5 years. But yeah. You expect it to happen quickly, and people around you don't understand that thing, and I didn't at the time.
And I didn't either. Like, again, it's just like the tip of the iceberg when you actually get the diagnosis. Like, oh, there's all of this yet to come. Okay. But it was so freeing, and it was so just one of the best things that could have happened was to just get told that this is what's happening, so that you're not left just trying to figure out what's going on and making sense out of why you feel so ratty and everyone else looks like they're having a good life. And I'm thinking to myself, if everyone felt like this, the line out the doctor's door would be a mile long. There's something wrong with me. Like, there's something really wrong. And begging the people at the vitamin shop to try to help me to figure out what my symptoms equaled. And, because the doctors, after so long, you just kind of give up in that direction. At least I did.
Yeah. And I think the controversy around Lyme disease doesn't help anybody. I think that's something that I think there's some people who could be a bit more responsible in the way they deal with it. It doesn't help anybody to have this level of controversy. I mean, if I go back to my situation, as I said, when I got this diagnosis, I was happy I was going to be on the right path. But because it didn't happen quickly, I'm then questioning that diagnosis, because there's so much controversy saying these people are charlatans looking to take all your money. And it's kind of, I don't think that particularly helped me at the time, because I started to doubt myself, and I think it delayed my recovery by at least another 18 months, 2 years, because I was looking that I went in this direction as a result of that rather than a different direction. So I wish I wish the authorities or the people behind it could be a little bit more responsible in the way they spoke about it and try to help rather than have a go at each other all the time.
That's a very good point that you bring up too. And one that I don't know if it's been so succinctly put before, and just that you can start to really doubt yourself because it takes so long to get better. And I'm always cautious when I talk to people who are seeking help about that topic in particular, and just telling them that it's going to take a long time, because I'm not God, and maybe they'll get better really fast. I don't know. But I also like to let them know that it can take a long time, because we didn't get there overnight. It took a long time for those of us, typically speaking, when you don't catch it right away. It takes a long time to get diagnosed. So it took a while for your body to get down into the space that it got into. And consequently, it takes usually the same amount of time almost to get better on the other side of that spectrum. And that is very difficult and challenging for people, because you start to lose hope. And I think where we are as a society anymore is that things are on demand, right? Like, it's now. I go on Amazon, my thing's here. It's same day delivery half the time. I don't know how it is in the UK, but here, it's like right there, right then. Or you want to know about something, you just Google it right there. And so everything has come to this faster pace of being. And it's the same with healing. And people are like, okay, good, get better. And it's like, well, 7 years later and I finally feel pretty much better, and they're not expecting that and they don't want that. Most people don't want to sign up for that either. That's the other thing is like, you get the diagnosis and then it's like, well, yeah, now you have a pretty long road ahead of you of healing and trying not to be discouraged and trying not to give up or get too down on yourself. And that's something else maybe you could talk about a little bit. And you had mentioned just in having purpose, but like, how do you keep going? Like, how do you find the strength? How do you find the wherewithal to tell yourself, like, put the blinders on, don't fall prey to those other stories about people not getting better, and stay the course for yourself? Like, how did you really manifest energy for that?
Yeah, I think for me, I was fortunate. So having a purpose with the business starting off that, which at the time wasn't really a business. I didn't have in my mind that I was doing a business. I was just doing some things to keep me occupied, but then became a business. That was really important because I'd have commitments, like I've got to get this done by then. I've got to get this done by then in order for this to happen. So that helped. I also had, a great family. Really, really lucky. My wife was absolutely unbelievably supportive, fantastic. And I also had 2 young children. And they don't want to see sort of dad in a bed lying down when they come home from school. They want to see dad up, as a normal dad, basically. So they were the kind of things that made you do those kind of things. And I had to miss a lot of their things that they did, performances, football matches, things. I had to miss quite a few of those, but I'd do everything I could to be there because, I didn't want to appear to be different from all their friends and their dads and their parents and all the rest of the stuff. So those things combined made me sort of, determined just to keep going. But I do think that's why I think the thing you're doing great in the sense that it would have helped so much if I just knew people who had got better. It would have been really, really good at that time because you can. It's only now that I know that and then wrote the book and that I know that. But at the time, it would have been fantastic, which I think is why what you're doing is great, really good.
Thanks. And again, why things like this matter, because if this wasn't here, maybe I wouldn't be here, right? Maybe like this at that time was enough for me to keep going and to keep moving forward. And I applaud people like us who take the time to try to give back with things that have helped us get better, to have that hope to keep going, because I can't imagine the pressure that must be felt as a parent. I don't have children. And sometimes I think that's partially because I was so sick during that time period when people have kids that I didn't. I don't know. And sometimes I could maybe cry a little bit about that. But like the pressure as a parent, when you have little eyes staring at you and want to play with you and they want you to be like the normal parent and you're really not quite able to do that, just how overwhelming that would be. I have a good friend who's still getting better and he's got 2 kids. And I know that's one of the things that really is hard. Yeah. Very, very hard. And so I just want to acknowledge that and just the fact that you found your way out of the paper bag. Like,
but again, they were the children. Again, they were fantastically understanding. Their understanding helped me more determined to make sure that I wasn't in that position, or I'd do everything I could do to not be in that position. I think sometimes you just try and put on a brave face whilst you were doing whatever it is they wanted you to do, and then afterwards, once they go to bed, you flake and say, "That's it, that's me done." Yeah, exactly. But you try your best, and that's what it's all about.
That's pretty amazing, and I'm sure that they're very thankful that they have their dad back in full capacity. And like, what a good example you've set for them too. That you persevere through that you have figured out how to turn something so terrible into something so amazing, right? And just how to persevere and to stay committed to self and to just overcome obstacles. Like I think that must be an amazing thing for them. A wonderful gift that you've given your children through this experience too.
Have to ask them that.
What's that?
I think the good thing is for me that they both, and more importantly, is I think they both understand and respect tics. So now they check themselves. They check themselves when they go anywhere. They check themselves, which I think great. Okay, that's fine. That's good for me.
That's right. That's right. 'Cause as we both know, they are really small. And a lot of people don't really understand exactly what those small little creatures can do. I think of them as creatures from the devil. And
Yeah.
like spiders, okay, fine. They're kind of creepy and nasty, but they serve some sort of beneficial purpose on the planet. I,
No.
there is nothing that ticks do that is beneficial in any way, shape, or form. There's nothing. You
No.
can't make me feel better about their existence on this earth and saying, oh, they eat this, or oh, they manage this, or
No. I have to agree.
no. So I'm glad at least that message was delivered loud and clear to them. And that sometimes is just half the battle in this fight, is just people being aware, people understanding that ticks are there, what they can do to you, what the sickness can look like, because as you and I both know, sometimes it's not the standard textbook case. Sometimes it takes years to get diagnosed. Sometimes we've got doctors telling us that we're depressed, or there's nothing really wrong with us, or it's too much stress, or these are all things that I was told, which I'm like you. The only thing that's causing me to be depressed is how I feel in my body right now. It's the sickness. I'm not a depressed person that's making me feel this way. I feel this way, which is making me depressed because I feel sick every day of my life. And that's something I think that needs to get changed very much so with the medical community. And I was curious when we connected earlier if things are pretty much the same in the UK that they are in the States. And sadly, it sounds like that. Although I can say it also sounds like more people are becoming aware of this, and there is more recognition happening, which is good, which is what needs to happen. I don't know about in the UK, but I know in the States, they say anywhere between 400 to 600,000 people a year are infected. And that's a really good chunk of the population.
Yeah.
And this is something that definitely needs to be top of mind for people, in particular, if you have unanswered health questions, things that are going on in your body that you're not sure about. This is a huge one to get checked for. And do you know in the UK, do they do the standard 2-tier testing that we rely on here in the States with the ELISA and the Western blot test? Or do you have different testing methods?
I think it depends where you go, but generally speaking, yes, they do have those very similar sorts of tests. But the slight problem here, I'll get this wrong, I'm quite sure I'll get this wrong, but my understanding is, in layman's terms, let's just say there are 90 varieties of tick-borne diseases, let's say. The site here in the UK that tests for it, which is down in Southampton, tests for about 10.
Yes.
Therefore, there are all these other ones that don't get diagnosed. Yeah, they are still just as serious and just as problematic. But that's my layman's interpretation of the way it is over here, I think. Yes. Whereas if you go to, say, Germany, they test for a lot more out of that 98 than they do over here. So you're more likely to get a result over there than you are in the UK.
Yes, which is very
hopefully over time, the more awareness is built up, the more testing will be put in place to be able to diagnose these things. I mean, I sort of wonder how many people, in my case, as I was saying, when I first went to the doctors, I was being treated for the individual symptoms rather than the underlying cause. I wonder how many people are being treated in that way currently. There may be a whole group of people who've got this thing that are being treated for all sorts of ailments, which are actually never going to be cured unless you get to the root cause. But who knows?
Very well said. Very well said. And that's a lot of the rub. It's like we're operating off of testing technology that hasn't changed in over 40 years. And it's maybe at best 65% accurate. And so a lot of people are getting false negatives or not adequate testing that way. And so that's a problem. But then also how many people, I, like you, was going for individual symptoms as opposed to the whole entire kit and caboodle. And I think had it been looked at maybe from that level sooner, maybe it would have been caught sooner. But it was like, oh, I've got these hives, or, oh, I've got night sweats, or, oh, I'm not sleeping right. Maybe I have apnea, or, oh, I've got, it's just all these random little things that never got pointed towards Lyme or tick-borne illness. And so do you know, and I think also to back up is part of what the problem is with that testing, and I've mentioned this in other podcasts, is just that it's only looking for Lyme. it's not actually looking for the co-infections. And granted, you didn't necessarily get tested for those specifically, but I think that's also doing people a disservice if maybe you have Bartonella and not really Lyme, and you don't get that test either. That's obviously a problem because you're not getting that diagnosis that you need to treat adequately. And then I think as a last question for you, could you tell me what would you consider as the best thing that's happened to you as a result of getting Lyme and tick-borne illness?
The best thing that's happened to me. I think we always. I mean, yeah. There's lots of things in a way that are good and lots of things that are bad. So people sort of you can argue and say that you lost 10 years of your life, but in a way, I just had a different 10 years of my life. It wasn't I lost 10 years; it was just different, I think. And I think family support was great, and I realized that was there. So that's a plus. I suppose the one I always come back to is if I hadn't had Lyme disease, then I wouldn't have Plytime as a business that I'm now doing. And I think also if I hadn't have had Plytime, I probably wouldn't have recovered from Lyme disease. So the two things went hand in hand and helped each other in a fashion. So I kind of think that coming out of it, I found probably a better purpose than I had before in terms of what I want to do going forward, and that's a good thing. I wouldn't say it's financially the easiest route to have your own business, but hopefully it's a slightly more rewarding one in the long term anyway. So I think it would be the thing that I come out of it with, because I don't think that would, if I hadn't have had Lyme disease, I would have just carried on the career path that I was on. I'm absolutely sure of that.
Yes. And so I think for many of us, that's one of the greatest things, is that we really learn who we are. And we have a much greater sense of purpose, a much greater clarity in the direction that we need to go with our life, and really more of like our God mission, if you will, is like, why are we really here? What is this really about? Is it, I'm not just supposed to be here at Kellogg's selling cereal for the rest of my life. I'm supposed to be here doing this work. And
you do start to realize that time is precious, time is short, and you start to think, what do I want to do? What's going to make me feel like I've achieved something, or whatever it is that people want out of life. Just certainly start to think about those things more. Yes.
And so that's good. So I'm grateful for you spending this time here with me. I'm grateful that you got better. I'm grateful that you wrote this book. I'm grateful that you were able to find your business purpose, and just, again, a greater individual sense of purpose, that your kids are more versed on this. And I would imagine that, think about the countless number of people who have learned about this through your experience, right? Like, how many people do you think now know about Lyme disease that didn't know about it before?
All my friends, whenever they, friends of friends, they'll give me a call and say, "Oh, I've got this friend who's got this. I've got this friend." I'm thinking, I'm not really educated enough to provide support, but here's what I would do.
But you are, though. You are.
Well, been through it, so yeah. Hopefully, you've got some idea.
There is nothing that you can do to run from that, and
no.
There is something that speaks volumes for people who have the experience. Whether you think that you know a lot or not, you know way more than people who are just stepping into this space. And don't ever discount yourself that way, because you have so much to provide and such learning to give to people in so many capacities. But I am very, very grateful for you. I'm so grateful that you're alive and that you're healthy and that you're whole. And I really do appreciate this time together. I'm really looking forward to sharing this episode. If anyone is interested to reach out to you, you're open to that for people?
Fine. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I know we're connected on Facebook and LinkedIn. Are you on other social media platforms, or?
Probably more LinkedIn than anything else at the moment.
Okay.
And then we've got people contact us through it's plytime.com. They can always come there and contact me through there if they want to. That's absolutely fine. And if people do want any help or any support of any sort, by all means, ask some questions. That's fine.
Thank you. I appreciate that openness. And again, if you're interested, anyone listening, this is a fantastic read, The Kiss of Lyme, that Ian has written and contributed to our community to help people understand that it is possible to heal. We can get better. he is great proof of it. I'm great proof of it, and it is possible. So hold on to that hope. If you're at the end of your rope in particular, do yourself a favor and listen to some more of these episodes and some other people who have, again, regained their life and their ability to function as a human and to exist amongst the living, and potentially even find your soul purpose, which is one of the best gifts that we can get out of this sickness. So thank you, Ian. I really do appreciate you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Anne.
Yeah. Take care.
Thank you.